The texture of the cookie butter is still cookie buttery. Hey friends, I hope your week is off to a great start. Today we're going to be trying out another recipe from Claire Saffitz's cookbook Dessert Person, this time back to the breakfast section for the Speculoos Babka. So I've actually never tried babka before, and truly the only thing I know about it is what I learned from Seinfeld when they were fighting over the last chocolate babka at a bakery.
That was our babka. We had that babka.
What's this one? That cinnamon babka.
Another babka?
There's chocolate and there's cinnamon.
Oh, well, we gotta get the cinnamon.
No, but they get the chocolate. We'll be going in with lesser babka.
This recipe, it looks really tasty. It's got this cookie butter swirl running through the center. It's topped off with a crispy, crunchy streusel topping. So these are all good things that I liked. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. The first thing we're gonna prep is the cookie butter swirl. So to do that, I've got my cookie butter here in a small bowl. To that, I'm going to add some melted and cooled unsalted butter, along with ground cinnamon and kosher salt. And we'll just stir this all together to get it evenly combined. All right, so you can see the texture here. This is nice and homogeneous. You can see the little flecks of cinnamon running throughout. So we can just set this aside until we're ready for it. Next up, we'll make that brown sugar streusel crumb topping. So here in a medium bowl, I've got some AP flour. To that, I'm adding kosher salt, a little bit of ground cinnamon, and some light brown sugar. We'll give this a quick toss around with the fork, and then last adding in some melted and cooled butter. And again, just using that fork, we're going to toss it around to get everything incorporated. And this technique is slightly different versus what we've done in the past with crumb toppings. For instance, with Sola's pound cake as well as Claire's coffee cake, we used room temperature soft butter and pinched that through the dry ingredients rather than this melted butter. So you can see the texture here. This is quite a kind of moist crumb. It feels a little bit like cookie dough, but you can see obviously when you press it together, it's really going to hold its shape well. And now we'll set this aside until we need it. With the sub-recipes prepped, we're ready to move on to actually assembling the babka. So that starts with a yeasted dough. So this is Claire's sweet yeast dough, which is one of her foundational recipes. It's the exact same dough that we used in the maple walnut bun video. So if you already watched that, you're familiar with the process. If you haven't watched that one, I did create a separate video just for this dough. I'll link it right here so you can watch that before attempting the babka. I did make the full recipe for the sweet yeasted dough. So we're going to use half of it since we're making only one babka. That other half we'll save for another project. So let's get this turned out onto a lightly floured surface. All right, and we'll cut this just approximately in half. All right, so then we need to quickly degas the dough. So I'm just pressing down with the palm of my hand to knock out some of that air from the initial rise. And we'll do a little bit more flour and we can get this rolled out. All right, so we want this into an 8 by 10 rectangle. So I'm gonna initially start by just stretching it with my hands. You can stop and sprinkle more flour underneath as needed just to avoid any sticking. All right, so this is 10 inches wide by 8 inches deep, so we are ready to add in the filling. So we've got our prepared cookie butter mixture. I've never tried cookie butter before, and this smells so delicious. These Biscoff cookies are really the only good part about flying with Delta.
I'll book a ticket on some garbage airline. You know, I don't want to name an actual airline, so let's just make one up. Let's call it like Delta Airlines. Because we're Delta Airlines, and life is a f***ing nightmare.
And the fragrance is exactly like that. So I'm hoping that the taste is as well. All right, so with that filling down, we can just use our spatula and spread this out. You do want to leave about a 1/2 inch border on the far side of the long edge of the dough. That'll allow us to adhere the roll to itself. All right, so that border is intact. And now we need to just roll this up. So starting at the long edge closest to you, slowly bring this up and you want to tightly roll it over onto itself. And you can see we're getting kind of a tidal wave of cookie butter in there, which I think is okay. And we'll let this rest seam side down just to keep it nice and adhered together. All right, so we've got our roll here, and now we need to pinch this in the middle and stretch it out just a little bit to get it to an even uniform thickness all the way across. And now we're going to start forming the log. So I'm bending this toward me so it's in a U shape. And now we need to cross this over itself a couple times. Actually, I think it needs to be longer than that. So Claire didn't specify in the book how long we need to stretch this to. However, looking at the picture, she's doing quite a lot of wrapping and twisting, so I think we need to get a little bit of length on it. All right, so I've got this stretched out to just over 18 inches long, and now we can bend this into a U shape, and now we'll start twisting this. So I'm lifting one side, taking it over the top, then we're going to twist this up again, and then one final time. And Claire says to just pinch it together to hold it. So we've got the babka formed into the appropriate twisty shape. Now I'm going to pop this into a loaf pan that I've got prepared with butter, parchment paper, and then more butter. And we'll just carefully lift this up and set it inside. And then we're going to press down on this just gently to help extend it to the edges. Perfect, so we are ready to let this rise for a second time. So I'm gonna cover this with some cling film and we'll set it aside for 40 to 60 minutes until it's about 50% larger than it is right now. So I'll see you when we're ready to bake. So I haven't had my coffee today. We should have rolled that babka out to 18 by 10 rather than 8 by 10. This would explain why the filling was kind of smushing out and why we had to stretch the log so much. We got to the same end result. I had stretched it out to the same length that Claire wanted us to have it at, so net, it all worked out the same. All right, so the babka's been rising at room temperature for about 45 minutes. So you can see that the size here, it's about 50% larger than it was when we started. So now we are just about ready to bake, but first we need to brush it with a light coating of beaten egg. This is gonna help with browning, and it's going to act as a glue to hold our crumb topping onto it. And now we've got our crumb topping. You can see that this really firmed up while sitting at room temperature. So it was quite loose before, but now it's more like a cookie dough, but it does break apart quite nicely. I'm not breaking these up into super fine, like powdery pieces. I'm trying to leave them a little bit larger so that we can get some of that crispy, crunchy strudel action on the top. Perfect, so we're ready to pop this into our preheated 350-degree oven for 55 to 65 minutes. Since this is such a deep bread and there's so much topping on here, Claire actually recommends using an instant read thermometer to check for doneness. So we'll know when this is done when the internal temperature of the bread reaches 185 degrees. Our babka baked for a total of 55 minutes. I let it cool in the pan for 20 minutes before removing to a wire rack to cool to room temperature. And this is the end result. So you can see we've got a pretty good swirl pattern in here. The bread looks nice and tender. We've got some pretty crumb action happening on the top here. So overall, I am happy with how this turned out from an appearance standpoint. The aroma while this was baking was absolutely unbelievable. My house smelled just like a bakery. So added bonus to making a babka first thing in the morning. That said, I'm super eager to see how this tastes. So let's see. I'm gonna go for this bottom corner. Making a mess on my floor. Wow. The texture of the cookie butter is still cookie buttery. So it's kind of like sticking to the inside of my mouth in a way that I didn't expect it to. I expected this to feel more like a cinnamon roll where it's just kind of there. But this is making its presence known. What I do like is this really golden bit along the edge of the pan where we had all that butter and the parchment paper. So it's not burnt. It is a deep golden brown and the texture of it is absolutely incredible. The bread, you can see, it's really springy and tender. This is very similar, obviously, to the maple walnut bun since it's the exact same bread, but in a different format, I expected it to be a little bit different. The strudely bits on the top are super crispy. It worked out exactly how I wanted it to. They're nice and big and present and really, really tasty. So overall, really happy with this. I think a good first experience making a babka, definitely something that I would be willing to do again. Not too time consuming, kind of a cool presentation in a different format for breakfast breads, which I enjoy. So I really hope you liked this week's video. If you did, please be sure to give me a big thumbs up and click subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week.